right, this is Skip Taube with Naturally Mendocino, broadcasting a live call-in show on coastal access issues on Mendocino TV tonight, July 20th, 2016. I have three guests with us tonight in the studio: Marie Jones from the city of Fort Bragg, Charlie Lorenz, the abalone hunter, and Lauren Rex, the superintendent of the state parks. And are we all ready to go? I just want to say thank you all for taking dinner time out to do this show. And I want to tell the audience that the number here is 964-0101. Your questions are welcome. I have a lot of questions tonight. I think I'd like to start with maybe something that's general. So I'm going to start with Lauren. I understand you've been doing a lot of work on the local parks in terms of improving access, especially for people with disabilities. Could you give us an update on that?
Correct. We've had our accessibility unit team working most recently at McCarricker State Park, and they've been working on accessibility upgrades to the campsites as well as our trails. Laguna Point has a new accessible ramp going out to the boardwalk, which is also accessible. And we are ramping up to look at future accessibility upgrades. Silvergate parking lot got done by Pudding Creek.
Okay.
That went from a chemical toilet to an ADA accessible
All right.
toilet. We put in an ADA accessible parking spot at Ward Avenue. And then our focus is going to be shifting towards Van Dam and Russian Gulch in the coming years and months to look at doing accessible campsites, making the trails, both parks, the main trail is Fern Canyon. So those will look at getting accessibility upgrades, as well as looking at bathrooms and other facilities.
All right. And something on the Mendocino Headlands coming up?
Correct.
Trails?
Correct.
Bathrooms?
We've done a presentation to the Historic Review Board about our proposed project. It's being reviewed right now. We're completing the CEQA documents on the Mendocino Headlands Trail ADA improvement project. So we're looking at doing a natural, flattened, compacted surface that people can be able to use wheelchairs or strollers or whatever you might have to get around the headlands. The benefit is it's going to be protecting a lot of the natural resources, limiting some of those volunteer trails, protecting some of the cultural resources, and really helping to prevent a lot of that coastal erosion that you see happening out there on the bluffs when we get some big rain events. The way that the trails are now, they're entrenched and channeling a lot of water. Right. So it's a win-win all the way around for the environment, for the trail system, and really opening up this great headlands for people with disabilities or mobility issues.
Nice. You brought up a thing about volunteer trails. And I wondered if you would elaborate on that more, because I remember a little earlier, Marie, you were talking about responsible use of the parks is really very important.
Yes.
And I
so
think that you're alluding to something here.
Sure. So we have Mendocino Headland State Park was, taken by the state in the 70s. 1976, they did the general plan, but the general plan didn't include any trail systems or any designated trails along the headlands. So we have main trails that have been developed over the years by public use that are in general alignment of where people want to go on the trails, but then we have these volunteer trails that a couple people decide they want to blaze a trail over to another section of the park, and cross-cut trails, which tramples the vegetation, it increases erosion. So as part of this ADA project, we're going to be developing some designated trails throughout the park, but then also looking long-term. Big River, 7,000 acres, has been added to the Mendocino Headlands unit, so that trail system has not been designated. And looking at doing an overall general plan update for the headlands as well as Big River unit, Van Dam, Russian Gulch, and looking at networking trail systems and looking at the designation of these trail systems 30, 40 years later.
That's great. I mean, I remember when Big River Park was dedicated, the guy who was the head of natural resources for the state of California, I forget his name, he came and he said that the overall plan was to take all of the watersheds from Van Dam, Russian Gulch, Jackson Forest, Big River, and let it return to an old growth forest, that they would never log that part of Jackson State Forest that was in the Big River watershed, and the state parks would obviously never log their lands. So it's like this huge forest exists as a result of this partnership.
Right, right.
So do you work closely with Jackson State Forest on
We
this
do.
kind of stuff?
We do. A lot of our interaction with Jackson State Forest revolves around the Mendocino Woodlands
Yeah.
and the projects, because that shared roads, and we have a really good interaction with them there, as well as the pygmy forest at Jug Handle. The Jug Handle is designated as a national natural landmark because of the pygmy forest, and we manage that jointly with CAL FIRE. So we've got a really good relationship working there. But then also we have some nonprofits like the Mendocino Land Trust that step up and help with some of the watershed enhancement projects we've done at Big River, as well as other granting agencies like NOAA, Fish and Wildlife Service, that sponsor some of the fish restoration work we've been doing.
So state parks relies a lot more than just its budget from the state to get things done.
Correct. Any kind of major projects have to be either a grant-funded project or something that gets funded through a headquarters unit. Our day-to-day budget doesn't cover any of those types of projects.
And that sort of echoes the city of Fort Bragg. Your job is to find grants to make up the difference.
Well, my job isn't only to find grants. I also manage and do the entire environmental review and permitting process, and then also manage the design and engineering and the actual construction project.
Whoa.
So it's a lot more than just finding grants. The new Fort Bragg Coastal Trail is, everybody I think agrees is an amazing asset for our community.
Yeah.
And we did a recent survey there, and on one day we had over 12,000 visitors.
I was going to ask you
On
what
a
the actual
Saturday.
usage is. That's a one-day usage.
One day usage on a Saturday,
12,000
12,000
people.
visitors. And then I was
That's
just
phenomenal.
curious, like, what would a weekday look like? So I went out on a very windy and very cold Friday, and we had over 4,500 people.
Wow.
It's a lot of people come to
You're
that
talking
site.
like this is the most popular attraction on the coast right now.
Well, I think it's the newest.
That's one of the reasons it's,
Yeah,
it's like a new restaurant.
It's like a
Everybody's
new
got to check it
restaurant,
out. Yeah.
and I think the other thing is Glass Beach has always
Right.
been incredibly popular, and people, now there's much better access there. I think the other thing, like Lauren is doing, providing more ADA accessibility, that trail is 100% ADA accessible, and I can't tell you how many times I've gone out there and seen folks in wheelchairs, and even one point there was a woman out there in a bed, and I think it was her final wish to be out
Wow,
on the
wow.
ocean. So that kind of stuff just does touch
Yeah,
you
yeah.
and makes you recognize that having that ADA accessibility is more than just a law. It's
Yeah.
for people who want to experience our environment. And, City Council has been extremely supportive of this project, but we couldn't do it without grants. We've used federal and state funding. Actually, state parks paid for a big chunk of the Coastal Trail project through the Prop 84 program, and then the Coastal Conservancy is a huge partner. They helped us acquire the site. So overall, that project is a $12 million project.
Wow. Sounds like a lot of money, but then you think about the usage and the satisfaction over the decades that'll come from that investment, and it doesn't seem like a lot of money.
Well, and you also have to recognize that almost a little over $4.5 million of that was just to get the property. It is 93 acres of ocean bluff property, so
Yeah.
that's
I think
expensive.
you also look at the revenue of people coming into town,
Right.
and the sales and the direct economic impact and indirect economic impact of bringing those people to town and having those facilities that they want to play and stay and
Right.
Yeah.
spend some money in the town.
That's
recreation.
huge, yeah.
Well, I'm gonna be a little bit of a devil's advocate then and bring up this sticky point about Glass Beach.
Mm-hmm.
Glass Beach is in fact the most popular destination. It's the most popular subject on the website when you Google anything about this coast. Yet we had a situation, I don't know, a few months ago where people received tickets for collecting beach glass.
Mhm.
And that was like shooting the tourist foot, as far as I was concerned. It's like, people have been coming here for decades collecting beach glass, and all of a sudden, they're told that they're gonna get a $500 ticket. And some people actually did get ticketed, and I've heard from people who keep track of these kind of things that this has discouraged a number of people from coming to Fort Bragg because they can't do what they're used to doing.
Well,
So I'm wondering, what is the rule?
Let's be clear
Yeah,
about what's
exactly.
happening
Yeah, I
here.
wanna be clear, because
Okay,
Glass
so.
Beach is between the state park
Mhm.
And the city park almost on the spot.
It's
So
it's
you-
in both locations
So
actually.
yeah, so there's like,
two glass
is there
beaches.
two sets of rules?
Well, I
Yes.
can only
Yes.
there are. I can
Yes.
only speak to mine,
Let's
but
speak-
Lauren
let's-
can
Sure.
speak to his.
You wanna start with the state, what is the
Sure,
state
I'll
rule?
start. So, the Title 14 of the California Code of Resource CCRs talks about it's illegal to remove geologic features as well as archaeological features. The glass could fit into either one of those categories. It's got a lot of historic significance with the town of Fort Bragg, as well as it's technically a rock mineral. So if you look at the pictures that you see on the website, pictures that people are taking right now of Glass Beach, it's not on the part that's been open to the public for years. The part on the state park side that has been open for years has been significantly depleted. The part that has gotten people so excited is the Georgia Pacific property that's been opened up, that's been off limits for so many years, and still has feet of glass on it. If you took a picture of the part that's been open to the public and people have been taking glass for years, it's not going to make the world's top 10 most interesting beach list. It's not going to make any of these things because it's been degraded by people taking glass year after year. So I think, my opinion, if we want to keep the interest with the tourism coming and the uniqueness of that beach, you can't have people devoided of all the glass.
Yeah. So I
So, before we leave the state, so what is the state's policy for enforcing this?
The policy is that if we see people actively taking glass off the beach, depending on the nature of it, if it's a pocket full or something, they'll most likely tell the people to go take it back. If we see people taking a 5-gallon bucket of glass off the beach, they're most likely going to have a citation. So we don't have a zero tolerance, or it's all officer discretion on how bad the violation is and what the proper step would be, but it is definitely something that we try to enforce, and I think raising the community awareness of it, because it's a split issue here with locals. I mean, there's a number of locals
Very split.
that feel like, hey, it's trash, get it off the beach, but then there's others that realize that it's the #1 hit on Google for this area, and it's a huge attraction for people. So
Also presents some unique legal issues. State parks has a boundary. It has something to do with the tide line.
yes, mean high tide line.
Where somebody collects the glass in an area that's beyond the state park boundary at a low tide,
Hmm.
they're not in violation of the law.
They are.
How's
They
that?
are.
If they're not on state park property.
It's state parks. State Lands Commission owns below mean high tide line.
Right.
So
And that property is managed in the same jurisdiction with the state parks.
I'm so glad you could, this has always befuddled me about how state parks could claim jurisdiction.
We don't claim jurisdiction, but it's managed under the same regulations that state
Okay.
parks are managed.
So I have a question then with that ruling, that is with state parks, but with the city, I know you have a rule about taking glass from the beach, but below that mean tide, do you have any jurisdiction to that glass?
Well, it's the same thing. It's the state. It's owned by the state lands. So anything below the mean high tide is owned by state lands. That doesn't mean that it's open season. Those resources are still archaeological. They're still considered archaeological resources because they're over 50 years old. And police officers have the ability to enforce the law when you come onto their jurisdiction. So if they see an act that's illegal off their jurisdiction and then someone comes onto their jurisdiction, which you have to do to get off that beach, then you can be arrested.
Mhm.
And in the city of Fort Bragg, we had lots of meetings at city council about this. And the city council heard from a wide variety of community members. And we do have a law on the books, and we have notices before you go down to the beach that it's illegal to take the glass. Again, it's up to officer discretion. I think if people have a pocket full, it's not a big deal. Those people who got tickets had 5-10 pounds full of beach glass in their backpacks. That's a whole different kind of user. That's not someone who's taking something for a tourist activity. That's somebody who wants to do beach glass on their bathroom floor or sell it on the eBay or whatever. And that to me is, I grew up here and I used to go to that beach when I was a kid I'll date myself now, 45 years ago and longer. And the beach glass back then was to the top of the bluff. You didn't have to climb down a hill. You were on it, like almost immediately. The amount of glass on state parks is probably 5% of what it used to be.
Wow. So that's just in your lifetime.
That's just in my lifetime. And now with the new site that's open on the city property, there is still a lot of beach glass, but in the year and a half that that's been open, the amount that's down there is probably half of what it was.
So we're trying to get clear as far as like with, on state parks, as Lauren mentioned, you see somebody taking a handful of glass, they're probably not gonna do so much.
Right.
But is that gonna be the same thing with the city?
That's pretty much how it is with the city. When
Oh.
people start getting out their 5-gallon buckets or even their 1-gallon bucket, then yeah, you know, and can you get away with it? Certainly. If you go in there, no police officers handy or no one's willing to call the police to turn you in, then you're probably gonna steal it because that's how people steal stuff when they don't get caught. They steal stuff. But it's still, essentially you're stealing from the future. You're stealing from people who have never seen that, from their experience of that, by taking it home and having it privately. It's a public resource. And, you know, we did look in the possibility of replenishing the glass and trying to figure out a way to add new glass to that site. Regulation-wise, it is a nightmare, because essentially what you're doing is you're asking the state lands commission, can we pollute on your beach?
Yeah,
And then you have to have that same conversation with Fish and Wildlife and NOAA. And all those people are like, we've never had this question before, but the answer is probably no.
It's too bad because I have this really great underwater video, I think you may have seen it, where I go under and you see the glass, an enormous amount of glass that's still underwater. And it'd be nice to be able to somehow bring that all back up on the beach.
Well, it does get deposited every winter, so those big storms
It does bring some of it
bring
up.
some up,
yeah.
and it's okay that there's
And
a
then it
bank
washes
out there.
out again.
It's okay, because then there'll
Yeah.
always be a little, you know?
Mhm, mhm.
Well, this goes back to what you were talking about, responsible use of the parks. And I want to bring up this question, I don't know if we ever got it answered earlier, is where can you drink alcohol in the state parks, if anywhere, and in the city parks, if anywhere? Like if you're on a picnic.
So with the state parks, we don't have a ban on alcohol anywhere other than the Mendocino Headlands, which goes along with the open container prohibition within the city of Mendocino. So at Big River Beach, you're allowed to have an open container of alcohol. McCarricker, in the campground, on the beach, as long as you're not in your vehicle drinking.
Okay, that's how, as long as you're not in your vehicle. So if you're parked on the Headlands in Mendocino having a glass of wine, that's
Yeah.
against the law.
Technically, by the vehicle code, it's an open container in a vehicle.
So it's not against the state parks rules, it's a traffic
Correct.
law.
Well, yeah, so Mendocino Headlands, like I said, there's an open container prohibition on the Mendocino Headlands. But if you're at McCarrick at Laguna Point and you want to have a bottle of wine and you sit down on a picnic table, great. Oh, we have 17 parks in the Mendocino sector, and all those alcohol is permitted.
Okay.
We do for the Anderson Valley Beer Festival. We do prohibit alcohol for the weekend of the beer festival at Hendy Woods, but other than that, we allow alcohol and we promote responsible use.
And for city parks,
Yeah.
you are not allowed to drink on city parks per
Any
city
city
council.
parks,
Any city parks.
no drinking at all.
Alcohol's not permitted.
You just had a party where you sold alcohol at the city park. How do you explain that?
I don't know, that wasn't my party. I don't know that I didn't know we did sell alcohol.
The city had North Coast Brewery at your party.
Oh, right, uh-huh,
They were selling alcohol.
yeah.
What's the deal? You just told me it's against the rules to have any alcohol in any park.
That's what the rules say.
Why isn't the city able to do this?
I'm not the person who made that decision, so I can't answer
Who
the
makes these
question.
decisions?
Well, the planning for the park unfortunately happened when I was out ill. I had a pretty bad injury in February, so I can't answer that question, but if you wanted to call tomorrow, I might be able to find the answer. I don't actually know who made that decision.
And it's a similar question with Mendocino Headlands. I can go right now tonight at the music festival and buy wine on the Mendocino Headlands. You just said that there's no alcohol in the Mendocino Headlands.
That's
So
great.
How does this jive?
So it works, the Mendocino Music Festival, we actually have to sign a resolution, and it has to be approved by the district superintendent to be able to allow the alcohol sales. They have to get an ABC permit, so they have to go through a number
Gotta
of
jump
hoops.
through a bunch of hoops.
Right, so, but it's all through a special event permit process with additional regulatory sign-offs on it.
And that's exactly the same thing that happens at the city of Fort Bragg. Now, hearing you talk about it rang my bell for me. We have a formal process where any event that happens on city property that wants to have alcohol has to get a license from ABC and go through our event process. So whether it's Paul Bunyan Days or whatever activity that might be happening on city
So it's
property.
not an absolute ban, because there's exceptions to it if you jump through the hoops.
If you get an ABC license,
It's
then
just
you're
that
allowed to serve
No,
alcohol.
individuals can't have a picnic with a beer in any city park.
Well, legally you can. Would an officer actually arrest you if you were having a beer? Probably not. They would probably ask you to put it away. If you were abusive and abrasive and
No, I'm just talking about somebody
rip-roaring
having a
drunk,
picnic, you know.
then you probably would get arrested. I mean, they are reasonable people, right, in the application of the law. And a lot of times people don't know what's allowed and what's not allowed.
Well, that's why I asked, because
And
I
so-
wasn't clear myself. I've heard
Right.
stories from different things and.
Well, I think living in a small community, we have a good working relationship with the city of Fort Bragg, with the county sheriffs, and, you know, I guess for a good example, the Mendocino 4th of July parade. You know, we do pre-meetings with business owners, with
Yeah.
the fire department, CHP, sheriffs, and over a number of years, the businesses have agreed to stop selling alcohol a certain amount of time after the parade to make sure we don't have the drunken ruckus that we had in past
The
years.
firemen used to sell it off of the back of
Yeah.
a little red wagon
So-
down the street.
So I think it's that community, everyone, the businesses, the volunteer fire department, everyone pitching in to get the common cause of, hey, we want people to come to Mendocino, have a great time, enjoy the event, be safe, and most of the people are going to leave afterwards. So let's be responsible with alcohol sales. And for the most part, all the businesses have stepped up and been a part of the solution and making it a great event.
Yeah.
Yeah. And for many years, you know, Noyo Beach was kind of a no man's land, I guess you could say, during 4th of July, because
Yeah.
we had quite a rowdy crowd come out and shoot fireworks off and get very drunk. And actually 2 years ago, the city council directed us to stop allowing people to bring alcoholic beverages onto the beach. And
Is that a
since,
city park too?
that is a city park.
Okay.
And since that time, we have had 0 arrests, we've had 0 problems with the fireworks, and prior to that, you know, there were bad fights, and it was scary, like literally our police
Oh yeah,
officers
you add
were
alcohol to
scary.
the equation, and it gets scary real quick.
Well, for some people, not with everybody, and
Yeah.
unfortunately, we all pay the price when some people misbehave.
I want to move to another issue about this access,
Mhm.
separate from the glass. It has to do with abalone access. And I'm really sorry that our little multimedia system didn't work out, because Charlie went out with Terry the other day and made a really nice video where they went to the access point that's designated on the city's map.
Uh-huh,
It says Abalone Access Point.
This is the South Trail.
right, uh-huh.
And why don't you describe, since we don't have the video, what your experience was? This, I want to frame it. This is the one access point
On
that's
the
allowed.
South Trail. Right,
Yeah,
And this is what happens.
it's very similar to on the North Trail too. You only have one access point, and as a diver, we're concerned about the safety of other people and you know what's going to be with work. And so we went to the point. The particular day we went out, on the NOAA weather, they were forecasting 4 to 5 foot swells.
so that's pretty big for diving.
It's not real big, but you know, pretty average, pretty average. And so we went to the point and looked at it, and it was definitely crashing on the rocks. The video shows it was beaten. In fact, I felt to a point where it would be very unsafe.
Yep,
And that's the only access point. So then I decided, well, let's go ahead and look to the south side of that cove. And it turned out to be that just right where the next little cove, right next to that point, it was very, very calm in there, as predicted. The waves were coming northwest, so basically anything that was fairly rough was hitting that point breaking up and becoming very calm in the next cove. And so the access points, what would happen to a diver that would decide to go out on this particular day and say, no, I think it's a little bit too rough. And it's probably one of those days you got that Sacramento syndrome, where you've got somebody that's here the one day,
And
not gonna be able to dive tomorrow,
Right.
and decides, well, nobody's looking, I'm gonna go over to this other access that's basically closed off, and is there gonna be a citation for that person then? For deciding to go on a safe cove versus going to a rough cove? It's kind of a tough call, I think, in regards to when you look at people's safety and everything. I don't know. Now, I understand that your rope laws and stuff are subject to maybe some change. Is that true?
So let
or-
me give you some background about what are the different resources that we're trying to manage on that site, because I think that's not always obvious to people that there are multiple different resources. So on both the North and South Trail, there are cultural resource sites, and we were in consultation with the Sherwood Valley Band of Pomo Indians for 2 whole years on this project.
Okay.
And the challenge is that the tribe does not want people damaging their cultural resource sites. So some of those ropes protect cultural resource sites. And in some cases there are rare plants. And in some cases there are offshore pelagic cormorant nests. So it's either protecting one or all three, or sometimes two of those objects. That's what those ropes are for.
Well, I know that, okay, so there's the point, there's the cove south of that, and then just even a little bit further south, there's a specific point for the Pomo Indians that they
Correct.
can access
Correct.
for their personal studies and
And
surveys.
their collection of abalone if they want, and frankly that's mostly what they do there.
This is kind of almost in between
Yeah,
those two
no, I
points.
understand. So the
Right.
other issue on the mill site is anything south of that is fill. And part of the reason why we didn't want to allow access south of that is sometimes that fill is upwards of 30 feet in height. So in other words, Georgia Pacific, as they operated the mill, they would just push all their old bark out on there.
Yeah.
And so that headland is actually what I would consider very unstable. Anything south of the small bench, the small bench without a back, Judy Tarbell's bench, anything
Yes.
south of there, you're a fool if you're trying to get down to the ocean there, because you may fall to your death. Now, north of there, I think if enough people really expressed a desire to have another access point that's between what we call Johnson Point and the Native American Preserve, I think there could be a possibility of putting an access in there. We would need to look and figure out where the rare plants are, and I think that is a possibility. But it's a balance for the city. The reason we picked that one access is you're getting out on rocks. So you're not going to cause erosion. Everything south of there, you're causing erosion because the drop-off it's a lot of dirt. It's like 5 or 6 feet of dirt, and then you hit rock. And so you're going to be causing a lot of erosion if you do
I
access.
wish
further
we had
south.
that video, because the video actually shows that little south cove right next to the point actually was very, very rocky. It had a really nice, easy trail going down. Solid rock, not loose cobble or dirt. Very, very solid trail, easy, in my
Well, I'd be
opinion.
curious to know where that is because
Yeah,
I've
well,
never
it's like you
seen
say
it.
that the city's open to looking at this and maybe making some adjustments. What's the process for doing that?
Yes.
Well,
Like you say, you'd like to go see it, so maybe.
yeah, so one thing I want to back up and say that it's never up to me. I
No,
don't
but
think
you-
it's up to
Yeah.
me. Like, we
Yes.
could bring it forward to city council.
Yeah.
We would have to look at potential environmental impacts.
Yes.
I mean, the other piece to this is that the Noyo Center for Marine Research wants to be located right there, and if all of the marine animals are removed, then their opportunities for research get reduced a lot. So there is, I think, some intent on the part of city council to not provide ready and easy access because they want to be able to facilitate that scientific study as well.
Right.
There are many places in California where you can ab dive. There are many places in Mendocino where you can ab dive besides this one. If it's a windy wavy day, it wouldn't be a place where I would go kayak even.
Well, that
So-
north point
You
there,
know, I mean,
I'm backing up a little bit, is describing that point that's accessible. And to the north of that is that beach, and it looks like a very nice beach and easy access if it was made available. But our ocean comes north, and a lot of times that rough ocean will come straight to that point and into that beach, which makes a nice easy access into maybe some trouble. That's why when you look at a lot of state parks, the popular places of diving are generally like Russian Gulch,
where it's safe to get in.
it's Van Dam,
Yeah.
it's on the south side of
So
the
let me
point.
tell you another story, and this might make you happier. Okay, so hopefully this coming year, if all the stars align and we get another grant, we're going to build the middle section of the coastal trail. And that will include a set of access stairs that you could walk down very easily to Soldiers Bay,
We
which
looked at
is
that.
Oh,
which
nice,
is
nice.
just
Well, I was
like
wondering about that.
Yeah.
that's just like Russian Gulch. Well, maybe not quite as calm as Russian Gulch, but
Pretty nice though.
there's a big landing, and
Yes.
there's lots of rocks north and south for you to go wander around in.
Yes.
And I hear that the abalone out by the sewer treatment plant's outfall are huge. All that great nutrition. I'm not sure if you want to collect them from there, but that's what I hear. So, look for that next year, and that will be
Well, that's
much safer access.
Forewarning, just like as near Point Arena, there was a place that was opened up a couple of years ago, and when that place was opened up, there was just hundreds of divers. They were just
Well, that's
crazy
that's
to
what
go
happened
in.
on the
Yeah.
Coast
They were
Trail.
just crazy.
That
to go
happened
in.
on the Coast
Yes.
Trail, both north and
Yes,
south.
yes.
Yeah, when they opened.
And that's what they're looking for, is some place that's going to be easy of access and safe, basically.
Yeah.
It's,
So
it's-
that's what
it's
will
tough.
happen next year. So that's
Yeah.
pretty soon.
Yeah,
All right.
good, good, very nice.
Abalones, anything more on abalones? We got it covered?
Well, the abalone, as you were talking about more, when we were looking around in that point, I actually explored and everything. Of course, there are some abalone, but I didn't find the big numbers like I was expecting.
That's because they've all been taken already.
A lot of places have been hit hard. I know this year, a lot of the abalone have been starving because not enough kelp. There's a lot of environmental changes that are really hurting the abalone resource too. And I could see, using that area for surveying and trying to protect the abalone resource is really, really a good thing. But again, for those people that have access to that one point, they need to have a way of being able to recover if some problem arises and they need to go to a different cove for safety. That's
Well,
where
I
we're
think
basically
that
at.
we're all intelligent people, and if someone is in a situation of not being safe and they need to go someplace else, of course they should do that.
Mhm.
I mean, you don't risk
It's-
your life
it's
to
a
not
really
to avoid
good
going
plan.
over a rope.
We always, in my shows, which is an educational show called The Abalone Hunter, and that's one of the things that we really try to teach people. Look for a secondary exit before you even start the dive and
Right.
everything, to be safe. And but unfortunately, as we've seen happen time and time again, people just don't do that. They don't think they're not trained, or just
They're inexperienced.
or
They've
they've
not
got the
used to our
Sacramento
ocean.
syndrome, and they're just anxious to get in and get out. And
Yeah.
ocean changes rapidly.
Yeah.
What was once calm could be rough, and they get in trouble. So, yeah.
I fully, and I'm sure any police officer would fully agree, safety first.
Mhm.
We had somebody out there before the trail even opened have a heart attack, and the city and the fire department went out and rescued that person, and we did not give them a ticket.
Yeah.
When you appeal.
Hey, just to be clear.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Well.
Um,
So that's the main point. Is if I was to say, oh boy, it looks really good, I'm gonna go out at this point, and just for some reason it turned rough, and my only access is where the roped area is. Am I gonna get a ticket? And hopefully,
Well, I'm not a police officer,
Yeah,
so I can't
yeah.
promise anything, but I think most law enforcement people are reasonable people.
Mhm.
we hope, because basically what you're saying is that there is selective enforcement of the law. And that's always a slippery slope.
Mm-hmm.
No, I'm
Yeah.
not saying they're selective enforcement of the law.
You both said that the officers use their own determination.
Discretion.
Discretion.
They need to have discretion.
They have discretion. That presents a slippery slope. I'm not gonna get into it, but I'm just saying, you don't make the laws, but the people that have to enforce the laws have to enforce the law. They don't get to choose which laws to enforce. You sign up to enforce the laws,
They
right?
choose how they enforce the law.
Right, so
There's
you
a
can,
number of ways to
you
enforce
can
the
do a
law.
warning, you can
Right.
do a ticket.
Right.
Yeah.
And we're looking at for compliance. You know, we're not looking to take everyone to Ukiah. We're looking for the lowest level enforcement to gain compliance. And you know, sometimes that's a verbal warning. Sometimes that's me showing up and someone drops their ab iron or buckles their seatbelt or whatever it is. Just being there
Yeah.
can be part of it.
It's like an empty police car on the road, slows
Yeah.
everybody down, you know?
You know, so do we take people to Ukiah and book them in jail? We do, but it's not our first choice, you know, and we try to, you know, for the sake of the community, handle everything at the lowest level possible and make sure that we get compliance.
All right. I'd like to move off the
Abilene.
sea into the air. I was walking on the Mendocino headlands a couple weeks ago, and I heard a zzzz. What the hell is that? I thought it was a swarm of bees.
Right.
And I see this lady coming to me. She's got a little tablet with some controls on it, and she's got a drone going. And I stop her, I chat with her, and I say, wow, if somebody was enjoying the nature in the park and they felt that this was a disturbance, would you shut it down? She says, no, I just walk away. And I said, wow, what makes you think you could just have a drone? Like, it's like a loose dog, you know, dogs have to be on leashes. She says, in the national parks, it's illegal to have a drone. And in state parks, she claimed that it was legal to have a drone. What's the rules on drones in the state parks and the city parks?
Well,
Or are there rules on drones?
yeah. So state parks, currently there's not a statewide ruling. There are some districts that have written their own posted orders to deal with that issue. We're definitely looking at that in Mendocino. We've got a number of issues with people around the Point Cabrillo Lighthouse that are wanting to get great shots of the lighthouse,
Oh, yeah.
but going out and harassing marine life and you know, the birds on the rocks. So we are seeing impacts for sure,
Yeah.
and those need to be addressed. Clearly, it's better for uniformity if we have a statewide protocol, so it's not different from region to region or park to park. But I think we're looking at some kind of short-term fix. Commercial photography has had some serious regulations put in place for using drones, and through the California Film Commission, there's pretty strict guidelines on what they can use them for. But the public use of drones, you know, until we get the law in effect, we're just really telling people to. There's other laws harassing marine animals. There's harassing wildlife that they can be cited for if they are causing a
What
problem.
about disturbing my peace and quiet?
Right.
I mean, really, you know, I'm an animal too.
Yeah.
I'm out there in the park.
So, but
Do
like
I
I
have to
said,
complain to get some action? I mean, what is the procedure?
the statewide regulations should be. I mean, they've been in revisions for a while, so
So it's happening.
we should be seeing it's moving forward, and at a local level, it's being discussed as well as potentially some stopgap regulations to protect the wildlife, and not only that, but just inform the drone users of what's appropriate and what's not.
Yeah, to me, it's like dogs. You know, they have dog parks. You got places where you can have dogs on leashes, the dogs off leashes. But drones, to me, should be treated very similarly as dogs.
You don't get a lot of dog complaints either, so.
Well, who's to complain to? You got no enforcement. I see loose dogs all the time. I tell people, oh, I would save your ass. You know, your dog is going to get an $80 ticket from the. You know, I know they're not going to get a ticket, but it's all I can tell them to try to leash their dog. Most people ignore me.
Yeah.
I don't know. Loose dogs really bothers me in the parks. What's the deal on drones in the city parks?
So in city parks, we have a prohibition against any motorized vehicle unless it's for a handicapped person or a city vehicle. I don't know that we've gotten to the level of interpreting that to include drones or not, but I think you could argue that a drone is a kind of vehicle. You are driving it and it is going around.
Got a motor.
It's got a motor. So in terms of the process, I guess I would need to ask our city attorney if it would apply to drones or not. And if it doesn't, then the process is to just call your city council member and tell them that this is a concern and they'll let me know, and then we'll revise the ordinance to include it as a prohibited use.
So right now, it's just a gray area.
I would call it a gray area because when we put these rules together, it was a year ago. And I think it was before drones really became like a standard thing that people had.
Yeah, more and more common.
And they're more and more common now. So yeah, so it might be time to re-look at that, but it's a city council action.
And the thing about the motorized vehicles makes me think of something that was in the paper, I don't know, a month ago. Somebody wants to have segways on the trails.
Correct.
Are those city trails, state trails, both trails? What's the
Those
deal on
were,
segways?
those were city trails, and segways are considered motorized vehicles. If you are disabled, you can use a Segway because it's a motorized vehicle for certain types of disabled people. But as a tour, you obviously aren't giving a tour just to disabled people, so city council did rule that it would not be permitted.
What about state parks?
State parks, there have been some interest of people doing tours. There's been some areas that were not feasible due to logistics. Other areas like the Hall Road at McCarricker, we've explored ways to make it, the road is 16 feet wide, so it's got a lot of width and ability to hold that type of traffic. But the people that were proposing it haven't come back with a final proposal. We've been talking to them. Clearly it's a tourist-based economy, and if we can have responsible use that doesn't hurt or interfere with the existing use, I think that's something that we could look at, but, definitely exclusion of current uses or, degrading the wildlife or anything wouldn't be a game starter.
Before I dig up some more questions, I want to say, do you folks have anything that you want to talk about that I haven't raised? Yeah, anybody?
I love state parks.
The city of,
So do I.
I go to your parks all the time, and I think
Yeah.
you guys do an awesome job with limited resources.
I kind of off topic, a little bit on the abalone side, but Water Safety Coalition in the area, we've got a huge influx of abalone divers due to the change in fish and game regulations.
Yeah.
You look at Glass Beach on a low tide and it is just packed. Cars all the way past Rossi's just
Wow.
going out to dive. One thing I found on a lot of our fatalities recently is that we're finding a lot of dead bodies with their weight belts still on.
Wow.
And I pose this question to the Water Safety Coalition, I'm posing it to the dive community and members out there that are watching this, but I'm looking for an awareness campaign on, dump your weight belt and survive your dive. There's so many people that panic, that have a heart attack, or they have fear, whatever they're having. Generally, it's not an official drowning where they get water in their lungs and they die from inhaling water. Generally, they're panicked, they have a heart attack, they have other types of medical complications where if you start to be in distress, you dump your weight belt, you float, you relax, you're good. You're gonna survive your dive. Whether we have a loaner weight belt program for people when they come to the coast or whatnot, but I think that's something I'd like to see addressed and try to get that awareness of getting divers to dump their weight belt when they're in trouble.
Education.
Yeah, hello. You're on
Education.
the air.
A lot of these divers that go out
Hi,
haven't got the
speakerphone.
education how to dive,
Hello.
and I think that's a big
I'm wondering
problem.
why there isn't a handrail on the stairs that are already at Glass Beach. And second, how was it a permit was issued for the segways if in fact they weren't supposed to be there? And thirdly, the city keeps asking for money to hire consultants having to do with development of the mill property. So I'm wondering why money is being spent on property that does not belong to the city, has never belonged to the city, and chances are will never belong to the city. And those are my questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Those sound like they were all for me. So I can answer the first one, which I only heard part of, but I think what
The railing,
the railing down to Glass Beach. Yeah. Actually, I was down there on Monday with Lee Welty, who's a local engineer who we are hiring to design a railing to go down
Alright.
to Glass Beach. It has been on our to-do list. It's a little bit of a tricky situation because there are, again, some resources there that we have to be careful about. And it's a very difficult problem to solve just purely from an engineering perspective because the slope is sloughing away. We have a wetland kind of going through place where the stairs are, and you have a lot of wave action at the bottom of the stairs that make the ability to have a stability kind of landing at the bottom the hardest, and that's actually where the biggest problem is. But Lee had a lot of good ideas, and so our hope is to get a solution put in within the next 6 months.
All right.
It is right now not a safe set of stairs. That's why there is a sign at the top that says, you know, proceed at your own risk. If it's slippery, be extremely careful. It's not a situation that any of us like the way that it is right now, so we do definitely want to fix that.
All right.
The second question was about the Segway tours and why could they get a permit if it wasn't allowed on the coastal trail. They came in and got a business license to operate out of a storefront in Fort Bragg. They didn't get a permit to operate their business on the coastal trail when they
Okay.
came in and got a business license. So it was just literally a business license to operate their business out of a storefront.
Yeah.
It was
That's
perfectly legal to
That's
have
what
their
everybody-
business
everybody
there.
has to do that.
So I couldn't tell them no. And the third question was about hiring consultants for the mill site. So far, all of the planning for the mill site has been paid for by Georgia Pacific. We have never used a dime of
So
city.
the city hires them but doesn't pay for them.
Neither of those statements are true. Actually, Georgia Pacific has hired all the consultants in the past
Oh,
for the specific planning for the mill site. The city has never hired anybody to do any of it. 2 years ago, Georgia Pacific basically dropped their planning endeavor because they're not a development company, and they felt like, I think that they wanted to focus on their remediation, which they have been doing. Major portion of the remediation will get done this year and probably another portion next year. So that said, it has been dropped for 2 years. I think city council is very aware, and the community as a whole, that that property is the future of Fort Bragg in terms of growth and economic development and new jobs. And staff is concerned, and I think the council is concerned as well, that if it sits, the plan sits for many more years, it will become completely obsolete, and we'll have to start completely from scratch. So what we have done is we've applied for a community development block grant of $50,000 to cover the city's costs to finish the planning process. And we wouldn't be hiring a consultant to do this, we would do this entirely in-house.
oh.
That's why it's so cheap. I mean, we're a lot cheaper than consultants. And I
It's
think
basically something you had to do because the GP just dropped that part of the ball.
they completely have dropped the ball. And I don't see the planning process going forward unless and until some developer buys the property, which could happen this year, it could happen in
Really?
10 years.
Is it on the market?
Not as far as I know, it's not on the market. But, you know, I think if somebody came and offered them enough money, they would be happy to
Get
sell
it
it.
on the market.
Yeah.
As is.
I think they're not wanting to market it until it's entirely remediated, because as long as there are contamination concerns, people will probably not, there's too much risk involved in buying the property. And I think if we do some zoning out there, city council does some zoning out there, it will provide future people who wanna do projects and bring jobs to our community some certainty that that could
Yeah, they
happen.
know what they're buying into.
They know what they're buying into. Right now, the only thing you can put there is a timber resources, and all you can do is a timber plant.
Hmm.
That's the only thing that's allowed on that property right now, besides public access.
Hey folks, this is a call-in show, 964-0101. Come on, we want some more questions. Otherwise, we're gonna go home.
Those were some good
That
questions.
was good.
I like tough questions.
Oh, yeah.
See what I got on my list here. Oh, this is the big one, coming down the pike. State Parks a few years ago, put in these, what we call Iron Maidens, little parking fee things out in the headlands and various spots. What's the status of that project?
Iron Rangers.
Iron
Yeah.
Rangers.
So the project is, you know, the original application for the coastal fees, Iron Rangers was denied by the county. At that point, it was not appealed to the State Coastal Commission. So the project at that point pretty much is no longer in the planning process. Included people that are following statewide politics of looking at Sonoma County, and they're going through the same beach fee process. It's an interactive process with the county, coastal commission, the local public, state parks, county parks. So there's a lot of players in the Sonoma County beach fees project, and that is a similar coastal development permit that was denied by the county, got taken to the state coastal commission and is being worked out at the state level. So Mendocino's has not been appealed to the state coastal commission, so for now there's no
Can't wait to see
action.
what happens in Sonoma County.
Right,
Basically, the coastal commission told them to go back and negotiate a compromise,
correct.
which means that there will be paid parking, as far as the state commission is concerned, unless the people revolt and refuse somehow.
Yeah, I'm not in the loop of that process at all. I read the Press Democrat and track it that way.
Exactly. So that's what it's down the line. And speaking of pay to park, July 4th, you had to pay to park. What was that about? At the,
You've always had to pay to park at the city for July 4th, and all of those paid parking fees go to cover the cost of the fireworks. The fireworks themselves cost about $10,000 each year, and we collect about $2,500 in parking fees to help defray the cost of the fireworks.
all right.
So you're actually paying for your fireworks when you pay to park.
So what kind of fireworks are we getting when we pay to park at the state? You don't have to answer that, right?
There will be fireworks.
There will be. I can't believe some of those Iron Rangers are still there.
Yeah.
I think Iron Maiden, by the way, is a metal band. Heavy
Yeah,
metal
that's
band.
Or throw your days.
So I was thinking of the parking meter maid or something, you know? Oh my God, Iron Maiden dogs, we talked about dogs, segways, we talked about alcohol, bicycles, we didn't talk a lot about bicycles. Somebody told me that if you're under 18, you have to wear a helmet when you ride a bicycle.
It's
Is this enforced in the state and city parks?
that is a vehicle code section. So anywhere on a state highway, public lands, you have to wear a helmet. So
If you're under 18?
if you're under 18 on a bicycle.
So you're on the Hall Road out of McCarricker?
Right.
You-
Right.
Does anybody enforce that?
You know, we use common sense when we enforce that. So if kids are in the campground riding their bikes, we say, hey, go to your campsite, put your helmet on. City of Fort Bragg has a great program at the police department where they actually give away helmets to kids
Yep.
that need a helmet.
So you don't enforce it, you solve it.
Well, we do both.
Yeah,
We
exactly.
enforce it by
You
solving
get a little
it.
money out of a fine and then you buy some helmets and give them away, yeah.
I actually don't know what the history is on enforcing that, so I can't answer that question, unfortunately.
I think the big thing for the law enforcement community is just keeping the kids safe.
Yeah.
And I actually put in for a grant and got a number of helmets to give away at the bike rodeo, the Police
Nice.
Activity League bike
Nice,
rodeo.
Yeah, yeah.
So City of Fort Bragg being economically challenged as it can be, qualifies for a lot of those grants. So we have the helmet program with the Ocean Safety Coalition. We're going to do a life jacket giveaway for kids to
Nice.
keep kids safe. So there's a lot of things we're trying to do to reach out to the community, and the kids are the future. So we want to try to keep them safe.
Remember when you were about 5 or 6,
That's right.
little kid of the community.
Yeah.
Make a call for some more comments.
Hey, any more call-ins out there? 964-0101. Give us some more questions here.
So I have a question then,
Yeah.
and related to the coastal trail.
Okay.
I belong to the Mendocino Abalone Watch, as you know, and there was a time we were trying to help with, watching the ab hunters there. But there's been a couple times where I was walking the trail and where the ropes are, and I was trying to help out by forewarning some of the customers, people that are visiting, that if they're over the trail or over that rope, that there could be possibly fines.
Right.
So there's been kind of a gray area. I understand there's a couple places there that you can go past the rope, or because so there's a couple places on the trail where as you're following the rope, all of a sudden the rope goes like this, and it just goes down to the ground like they're being supported or tied off.
Mhm.
And then there almost looks like a little trail that goes down the coast. And there was a lot of people that I talked to that were arguing, oh no, that's been there, and we should be allowed to go down there. Is that true? Or are they allowed to go down some of these trails? Or
Okay, so I wish I had a map, because it would be a lot easier to
Yeah, we
answer
had a
this
map, but
question
that part of
if
this
we had a
thing
map.
did work.
But,
This is all we got.
yeah,
But let me try and describe it. So I know exactly what you're talking about, and know that discontinuousness of the rope is just a function of its installation.
Mm-hmm.
So if you would like to imagine a virtual rope going across there, that would be fine.
Yes.
There is an area that's on the North Coastal Trail that's a little bit past Otsuchi Point. And Otsuchi Point is the big circle with the two nice benches on it,
Yes.
where the actual rope trail ends.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't put that on my little you can get there from here map, and it was just an oversight. Because you can actually get down to the ocean there and without impacting any resources, and there actually is a reasonably good path to get down there. The one thing that I will say though is that the Soldiers Bay Beach, or what's also being called Fort Bragg Landing, that's kind of in the middle between the North and South Trails, is still owned by Georgia Pacific. And if you get up onto their beach, you are trespassing.
Mm-hmm.
And they really don't like that. So they do call the city police to come in and enforce against that, because they have a situation where, you know, they have very few security and they don't want people doing illegal things on their property. And they also have some contamination issues there, and they don't want people getting into trouble. So
it's been kind of off and on from what I've been hearing. At one point, it was against the law where the rope is to go over the rope, and then I heard at one point, well, maybe not.
I don't know who you heard that from. It wasn't me.
Yeah, okay.
Maybe a wishful thinker.
Where I'm hearing it from is I've been on the trail several different times, and a number of people that were walking and say, oh, but we're just fishing. We're not ab hunting. That law is basically just for the ab hunters, but I'm just with a fishing pole, and I'm okay to go down to the rocks and fish off the rocks. Is there any difference?
That's actually not correct, because the three issues we're trying to address with those ropes, well, there's actually really four, is protection of cultural resources, protection of biological resources, keeping the bluff edge from eroding and causing unstable situation where you later have a cave-in of the bluff edge, which can happen when people go up and down a lot. And then, frankly, just to allow the restoration of the site to occur. The more people who walk over where we've done plantings, the more that is not going to survive, and it's going to continue to look kind of not natural. Like, I would say that the site right now is maybe at 60% of what it should be in terms of biological diversity in the plant base there. So you kind of have those four goals happening all together, and if a lot of people go fishing at a location, then they could impact any number or all four of those issues. So I would say the fishing is really, again, not allowed because you're crossing the rope.
Is there any chance for change? We've asked this before, because there was a number of people I talked to that felt that, well, quote, oh, we've been coming here for years. They shouldn't be just closing this down to us, all right? And besides, there's a natural trail here, looks like, is what they would basically say back.
Well, a natural trail can get established in a month if enough people walk on
As
it.
you mentioned, maybe a volunteer trail?
Right. I don't know.
Any place where there's a rope that ends, it would be the beginning of a trail.
Yes, that's correct.
That's the way it works.
That is
That's
the way
a
it
volunteer
works.
trail.
That's
Right.
the volunteer trail.
So, is there any chance of changing some of that? Because there are some people that feel that, okay, in the north side and the south side, there's only one access so far.
That's a question that has two different components to it. So one is it would really depend on the location and what resources might get impacted. So if there weren't resources that were going to get impacted and it was a location that just out of coincidence has resources on either side, so we kept the rope across just to be consistent, then there might be a possibility of doing it. But again, that's a decision that would need to come from City Council. So your avenue to try and make that kind of change happen would be to come to the Community Development Committee, which happens on the 25th of this month. No, 27th of this month. 26th, it's Tuesday. It's the Tuesday. At City Hall at 3 o'clock. And there you would talk to two City Council members, make your case. If they feel like they're in agreement, then they would have me bring it forward to City Council as a whole for their consideration.
Okay.
All right, thank you. That was like,
Yeah.
Civics 101.
Civics.
Yeah. So the main thing with any, you have these maps posted everywhere. And I walk up there, or if I was a new visitor and I walk, anywhere where these red lines are, whether the rope is there or not, if I was to be on the other side of that area, pretty much I'm gonna get a citation if officer.
No, that's not correct. So if there's a rope, you shouldn't be there. There are places in here where there's no rope, where you could get down. But I have to say, like for those people who can't see this at home,
Yeah,
but,
yeah, very tough.
but it's really kind of like the south half of the South Trail project site. It's incredibly dangerous
Yes,
there.
it's
And I
obvious you can see
would
it.
definitely not recommend people trying to get down there.
Is there a version of this online that keeps
Yes,
update
this
and
is
stuff?
this is online. It is.
I mean, you kind of keep it fresh, these things.
Well, I actually haven't revisited it since we had that meeting with the Mendocino Abalone
Yes,
folks, and the I prepared it at the request actually of
right.
the Mendocino Abalone folks and this police department because they wanted to know themselves.
Yeah.
But you know, again, changes to that. I mean, I think it's like I hate to sound like an attorney, but it depends on where those changes are because there are real resources that we're
Yeah,
trying to
but,
protect.
We know what the parameters are, and
Yeah,
there's a procedure.
and now you have a procedure.
Yeah, good.
All right, I think I'd like to wrap it up.
Sounds like dinner time to me.
Dinner time. I want to thank you all again for being here. And out there in the world, this is Mendocino TV, Naturally Mendocino. I'm Skip Tawby, your host. Tune in next time. I don't know when that'll be, but we'll let you know. Thank you.